Hi, I'm Sam Candy from Candy Consulting and welcome to Sustain Talks. Today I'm joined by Shane Herath, CEO and founder of London Inc., a company that is driving sustainable innovation. Hi Shane, good to have you here.
Great to be here, Sam.
Yeah,
thank you.
Good. Really looking forward to this conversation today. Last time we had a chat and I found out a bit more about you, I was fascinated by the information you were giving. So, but why don't you just tell us a little bit more about your background, about London Inc. and how long it's been going, etc.
I'm, as you said, Shane Herath, and I'm an advocate for sustainable innovation. In December 2018, Sam, I founded London Inc., which is a sustainable innovation tech ecosystem. Been in the IT sector for close to 19 years now, and working for big and small companies, as well as being a startup founder as well on a number of occasions. And then I grew very passionate about sustainability and found myself to be focusing on the intersection of sustainability and technology. Yeah. From a London Inc. perspective, we act as a special interest group and also help and work with a number of sustainable innovators, tech founders in their journeys, helping those companies find their feet, if you like. Yeah. As well as helping them build minimum viable products and software in a sustainable fashion, applying principles of sustainable UX and sustainable software engineering principles. As well as we're working on a new concept, which we're really excited about, and we getting a tremendous response for it as well on eco-friendly websites, which I plan to sort of tell you a bit more as the conversation progresses.
Yeah, that's I mean, that was the thing that I, when we first spoke, I was really surprised about. But just tell us, like, overall, what is your vision on, you've obviously at the forefront of sustainable innovation. What's coming? What are we going to see soon?
So being guided by this sustainable innovation and what it means. So sustainable innovation is the creation of new market space and products and services driven by environmental, social, or sustainability issues. I firmly believe that innovation shouldn't be called innovation unless it is sustainable, because we can't be going on this merry way of acting in that resource sort of depleting way, or resource extractive sort of business models that we've been occupying and so busy and consumed with, particularly given where we are as the human race and where the planet is at. So in that regard, I was guided by principles of sustainable innovation, and more I sort of started reading into it, reading up on it and learning about it. I started sort of applying that. So that we've sort of been focusing more on the technology side of things. So looking at the digital technologies, the internet, software, and how all these things interconnect, and how can we help to make a difference and bring awareness, as well as practice what we preach and try and sort of lead the way, hopefully.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, and that's the part about the technology that I was surprised about. How can technology help the climate crisis?
So from a technology and software perspective, which is a key part of that, we talk about software as well as hardware. Technology and software is virtually the backbone of every intelligent solution out there for resolving the climate crisis. So if you were to look at, for example, big data or data science, artificial intelligence in terms of predicting and things like tracking, monitoring, measuring, implementing, and also reporting on these things, technology and software play a crucial role. And it's also about finding the balance as well with each of these things, thinking about things like carbon efficiency, carbon intensity, energy consumption, and those things in mind as well, and try and sort of alleviate some of those crisis areas that the whole world is currently talking about. IPCC report, the recent one that is out, and this is on the agenda of many, but we need a collective cohesive approach to tackle this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a carbon footprint in technology that I knew nothing about. Do you want to sort of speak a bit more about the footprint in technology and in the internet as well, and in the websites and all of that kind of thing?
So the figures are really significant. We often look at aviation, we look at the sky, and we point fingers at all these planes. The aviation industry has been sort of portrayed as this big bad boy, if you like, in terms of the climate crisis, because of the fuel it consumes and the gas, the carbon emissions.
Yeah.
But internet is being sort of going under the radar. So if you were to look at from a figure sort of perspective globally, 4% of global carbon emissions are due to the internet, 4%. And that's quite on par with aviation. And it's on track to basically go past that. That's the quite sort of alarming fact. And also from an energy consumption perspective, 10% of world's electricity consumption is going towards the internet. So there's a real carbon footprint as well as energy consumption because of internet and its technologies. The worst part is that these figures are set to double by 2025. So
yeah,
a lot has to be done in that regard to kind of minimize it, reduce it. There have been some improvements with regards to some of the technologies, some of the infrastructure optimizations and so on and so forth, but we are nowhere near where we need to be.
Yeah.
One could think about, okay, translate this to me. I mean, how does it work out? Carbon emissions, because we don't, like in the case of sort of aviation or cars, for example, we don't see any residues or gas, emissions. It's not tangible, or residue, for example. But it's because how the internet is powered, and more often than not, it comes from fossil fuel sources.
Yeah.
And in the production of electricity, there is a lot of carbon being emitted in that process. So that's where the carbon emissions are basically happening when you think about the internet.
Yeah. And then with a website, I mean, it's really, like, as you said, it's not really tangible. So you can't really see what website is using up more of a carbon footprint. Like, how can you tell what's the difference between one that uses less emissions and one that uses more?
So it's this is when we started sort of looking at the internet. Internet is a lot of things, right? A lot of things that are interconnected. You're looking at basically the data centers, these sort of large warehouses, hidden warehouses, if you like, away from the public view. And there are issues around zombie machines, for example, servers that are sitting idle, still being powered. And we're not even talking about embodied carbon, for example, what goes into manufacturing these hardware, transporting them, and the costs in terms of keeping them powered and all of that, and also sort of end of life cycle, that process and the e-waste and whatnot. So when you think about the internet, it's on one hand, it's the data centers, and then you get these transmission networks, and then end user devices as well, the smartphones, the laptops, the tablets, and so on and so forth, right? So, particularly in the pandemic, we began to see a lot of people were interacting with certain services, businesses through their websites. So websites are a key part of, or integral part of, that internet's ecosystem, if you like. So key contributor in that regard. From a website's perspective, we've done some calculations. We've been working. We've got this calculator for measuring websites' carbon footprint based on a whole bunch of things like data transfer across the wire, the energy source, and so on and so forth. And working with Clean Growth UK and University of Brighton, which is it's a university-led network, and a few others. So the average website, Sam, produces about 1.72 grams of CO2 per page view. So every time somebody visits a web page, roughly 1.72 grams of CO2 is being emitted, right? And you get like slightly heavier ones, which are about, in certain cases, about 7 grams of CO2 per page view. And these numbers add up. Put this into sort of a little bit of context. With just under 5,000 sort of page views, monthly page views, an average website produces about 100 kilograms of CO2. And that's equivalent to driving about 300 miles on a fossil fuel powered car. So it's the scale. The numbers increase, and then all these accumulate. And now we're seeing the total from a global kind of carbon emissions perspective. 4% is the contribution of internet to the world's carbon emissions. So it's a big problem.
I'm probably going to ask a bit of a silly question now, hopefully not, but maybe other people are thinking that as they're watching this. But if I've got lots and lots of websites open at one time, and I'm leaving them open all day, am I using more carbon emissions? Should I shut them down and not go to as many websites throughout the day?
This is something that's been talked about quite a bit. Yes, I mean, in terms of the energy that it consumes. So when we have different applications opened or tabs open, there may be a correlation with regards to how much energy that's been consumed, because it uses real resources, electricity. And 49% of the world's basically carbon emissions are due to the production of electricity. And when you think about the production and the consumption of electricity, the figure jumps to about 89%. So that's the kind of the contribution these things make. And internet, consumes those, real energy resources. The other thing is, you touched on something, really fascinating, is the standby mode. We see standby mode as sort of this kind of default function that we see on a lot of these devices we use, the TVs, the smart TVs, the laptops. Easiest thing to do is like basically, put it on standby, the sleep mode. But I think it's about 1% of the global emissions are due to the standby mode. 1%. That's the quarter of the aviation's contribution to global carbon emissions. So 1% of the global carbon emissions are due to the standby mode that we use. So
if we all switched our televisions off and our computers off, we'd reduce 1% of the carbon emissions in the whole world.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people might sort of think about this and go, exactly. I mean, it's about being conscious of these things. When we start sort of getting, when we have that conversation, get people sort of talk about it, it increases awareness. So we've, what we're sort of seeing is like across our work as well, the different teams that we're working with, software companies that we work with, when you start sort of thinking about these things, when you approach the design, development, and deployment of software solutions and websites, how we kind of approach the consumption of these technologies, we begin to be a bit more conscious of it. And we make little changes, and these incremental changes can have a big yield in reducing and minimizing that carbon footprint. And a key thing to talk about here, Sam, is very important, is that it is not to sort of turn our back on technology. That's counterintuitive. We've seen amazing advances that can help in terms of diagnosis of certain conditions, to climate change, solutions around that. We've seen advances of robotics and Internet of Things. Some of the blockchain technology has been applied to agriculture, for example, to create a better sort of sustainable world. So, so it is about finding the balance and being conscious in terms of how we use these things. And for example, the whole upgrade culture. Just one quick example, if I may indulge.
Yeah, no, go for it. It's fascinating. Speak.
If you were to look at the carbon footprint of producing of a smartphone, it's estimated to be around 70 kilograms. And in our sort of lifetime, we go through about 23 handsets. If you were to think like every 3 years, we get this new upgrade.
Yeah.
You get this new shining smartphone, and we're excited about it. But you know, in the UK alone, it's in the first quarter of, I think, 2019, it was reported about 122,000 tons of basically e-waste, and quite a lot of these end up in landfill. And a lot of these times when we start talking about carbon footprint, it's effectively a bit of a toe print. Not the footprint, not the whole foot. Why I say that, and you know, Mike Berners-Lee has been talking about it. I've been you know, reading his book a little bit as well. How Bad Are Bananas? Fascinating read that. Is we tend to kind of measure what we're comfortable in measuring. So it's certain part of the kind of the cycle, if you like. We don't think about, okay, what's the carbon cost in terms of extracting certain sort of minerals from the ground, for example, or the manufacturing process? How do we power these factories? How do we sort of basically transport devices from one country to the other when they're produced? It's just there's a whole chain here. And as consumers, we have a role to play as well, because we fulfill this demand. So things get made and we are directly contributing to that. So if you were to skip an upgrade, if you can extend the life of say a smartphone you're using, then it's better for the environment, because you're saving a lot of that basically that huge carbon cost every time you get the new phone. And there's a whole lot of stuff. It's
fascinating.
It's massive.
Like, actually, it should also really become a part of the phone manufacturers to make the phones last longer, because, you know, as you're saying that, I'm thinking I recently upgraded my phone, but it was 3 years old, but the button stopped working and I couldn't have had it for any longer. So it's the job of the manufacturers as well to make sure that their products are more sustainable than you know, and us to try and use the products less. I just find, you know, we have to work together to find solutions. The batteries lasting longer, you know, because my phone most of the time has to be recharged a couple of times a day, because you know, I spend a lot of time on it for work. But it's if they could last longer, then it would use less emissions, right?
Exactly. And we got to be mindful, we got to be conscious, and we can influence, as you said, some of these manufacturers as well to think like that. Because you know, if there were to be, for example, a kit that enables you to upgrade your phone, you know, you can basically add that kit, or it gives you instructions, you know, this is how you can basically extend the life of this phone. Manufacturers aren't still quite thinking like that, because they want more units sold and we buy, and we also sort of fulfill that demand. But so that's what we're hoping to kind of create a bit more awareness around these things, and we work with we collaborate with multiple you know, organizations as well, the likes of sort of Clean Growth UK, Agile Strategy Lab, Strategic Doing, and many others in trying to kind of, and then the Tech London Advocates, you know, we're part of their Tech for Zero initiative. They got a net zero resource hub. We're part of that. So, you know, trying to kind of get the word out there, as well as bring attention to this issue, and how do we kind of influence the system a little bit.
I know you've been doing a lot of research over the last year. What have been your biggest lessons? What have you learned this last year?
More and more about some of these areas around internet and related technologies and the enormous carbon footprint, and been sort of following the trends, and also looking at some of the predictions with regards to the worst case scenario and the best case scenario, and where we might sort of end up. And so that's been a huge eye-opener in that regard, the recent sort of trends around that, as well as the server utilization, and how we need to sort of think about basically doing things in a much more sustainable fashion, particularly our approach to software engineering,
Yeah.
There are a lot of excesses in IT, Sam, from using memory to space, server space, infrastructure. A lot of excesses.
Yeah.
Because we don't see, like you said, this being tangible. Like you see sort of exhaust pipe, and then we see sort of things coming out of that, or residue or whatever. This has been, flying under the radar, if you like. So, so that's been a huge lesson for me. And
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, like if you think about, we talked about the phones and having your phones last longer, but in technology, if there was one thing, one change that you could make today, and maybe it is that, what would you change about technology?
The life cycle of most things. We design software for basically these infinite kind of resources around hardware. But hardware, you got to think from a not just sort of cost benefit analysis, but what I call an environmental cost benefit analysis. So you got to think about the environmental cost in these things, because we are paying the price. We've seen these extreme weather events, and climate emergency is a real concern, a huge concern, right? So upgrade culture is one thing, and how manufacturers push these devices out and we go and buy, how we kind of consume these technologies. We got to be a bit more mindful and conscious. We can still enjoy these things, I don't want to be the guy to say, let's not use technology. That is not the case. It is about how do we use it in a conscious and a mindful manner, and enjoy those, and also get the system to make those corrective measures, corrective actions, a little bit of course correction, if you like, in trying to sort of extend the life cycle of these things. And also things like e-waste, our digital behavior is another thing. And applying that thinking to our approach to technology.
Yeah, that's all of it, just so fascinating. Is why I wanted to do this Sustain Talks with you. When we first had the conversation, I was like, I didn't know any of this. I've got to share this with my listeners. We're on the last question. I always like to ask this, but tell me, who inspires you?
Many. I mean, there's a lot of work done by many. I mean, recent one has been Mike Berners-Lee and his work on measuring carbon footprint across a lot of things. Fascinating read. And I would like to mention Ed Morrison as well. He's been very inspirational for us at London Inc. So Eddie's work revolves around taking that sort of agile leadership in terms of strategy in open and loosely connected networks. So he's been making a real difference, not just in the US and at Purdue University initially, where he started off with the founder of Agile Strategy Lab, and his recent work as well with in the international sort of stage. He's been amazing, and his work, and he's a huge supporter, as well as Ed has come on board as a non-executive director at London Inc. as well, which is a huge blessing for our work as well. So we get a constant supply of motivation, as well as that know-how that Ed is sharing with us and the team. And also the likes of sort of Alan Moore as well. How do you develop businesses that the world needs? So how can you sort of look at challenging the kind of the business model or the innovation model from a more restorative and a kind of a regenerative way of looking at things? Because we really consume this sort of like resource sort of extractive, resource depleting kind of model, profit at any cost. But how can we be more responsible, sustainable, and conscious in our approach to technology and entrepreneurship? So
absolutely. It has been a pleasure, Shane. Thank you so much for joining me. If people want to get in touch with you, do you want to give your email address, or they can? I'll tag you on LinkedIn, obviously, or your website.
We're pretty active on LinkedIn, as you said.
Yeah.
So find London Inc. on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, our page, or find me, Shane Herath, on LinkedIn. Pretty active on Twitter as well, London Inc. HQ, and our website, londoninc.co. That's londoninc.co. We've got a sustainable innovation community as well, and there's a manifesto that we have put together as well, and we've quite a lot of people have signed up to that and have pledged to make incremental changes to how they do things, and that's really heartening as well. Brilliant. So we're very open to people connecting with us.
Great.
Of course.
Well, thank you again so much. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.
Absolute pleasure, Sam, and it was great speaking with you as well. Brilliant. As always.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.